Okay, today we're going to discuss graphing higher order polynomials. And you did this last week on a practice with Desmos or your calculator. I'm not sure which one you used, and it doesn't matter. You could have used either one. But today we're going to use our graphing calculator. So please get that out and turn that on. You're going to be asked a few different things about these. And the first thing that I'm going to have you do is state the degree. And the degree of a polynomial is the highest power of x. So the degree of problem number 1 would be 3. And then we're going to try to approximate what we call the zeros of the function. The zeros of the function are where it crosses the x-axis. So the zeros of the function are when y equals 0. And then we're going to discuss whether or not that is a min or a max. So a lot of different things. Put your calculator on. I'll try to punch through this calculator with you and try to point out some different things. I'm not real sure how it's going to work with the calculator and the marking at the same time. So have a little patience with me. Please punch with me though, and then you can see how I'm getting these values. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to punch my calculator with a y equals, and I'm going to put in x cubed minus 3x squared. And again, if you got a chance to do these last week, you saw that when we have a x cubed, we have kind of a s-looking function. So I'm going to try to get this picture onto my graph. So a couple different ways you can do it. One of the ways you can do it is hit the trace and see that we have the point 0, 0. And again, this is where I'm afraid that if I put 0, 0 on my graph and then I go back to my graph, I might lose that. So yes, I do. So let's see if I hit trace and I come down here to this low point. Remember, it's not 1.9 or 2.1, but let's trace and hit a 1 and see if that gets us to our low point. No, but if I hit 2, a 2 negative 4 will be another point. So that's one way you can do it. You can trace and see exactly where these points are coming from. But I might suggest that you do a second and then table, and you can get all these points from your table. So if I do that and I try to graph some of these points, I'll get my 0, 0. That point that we just traced is here. So 2, negative 4. I see a 3, 0 point, negative 1, negative 4. So if I kind of go back to my graph, I can kind of see the shape of this thing is what we call a cubic, and that's how I get my points. So we want to approximate the zeros. So when I approximate the zeros, I'm looking for where does it cross the x-axis. And we talk about whether we have what's called a relative min or a relative max. This in our graph would be considered a low point, so this is a relative min point, and this looking in just this area, this would be a high point, so this would be a relative max. So again, think of low points on your graph and high points on your graph as your min and max. This will be a lot of calculator exercise. So again, if you're not familiar with your calculator, please make sure that your calculator looks just like mine. Hit pause and see if you can come up with the problem number 2, and then I'll put on what number 2 looks like. So if you've punched number 2 out, you should have, again, kind of a squiggly looking graph. We'll talk about the degree. The degree, again, is the highest power of x. So we pick up that degree as a 3. When we approximate the zeros, we're going to look at where it crosses the x-axis. So in this case, we'll only have 1 0. And as far as a min or a max, we might talk about the min or max point. This might be a relative low point, so we would call that a min point. So again, how am I going to get this picture on my graph over here? I can kind of do a sketch, but we want to be better than that. So we'll get a sketch, kind of keep in mind what my picture looks like, but let's go and get some exact points. So hit pause. I'll show you how we get some exact points again. If we hit, on our calculator, if we hit second graph, that will give us some points. And just read these points like you normally would do. So a 0, -4. So get in your table where you can read some points. So a 0, -4 is a point. -1, -2 is a point. How many of these points do you need? You want to get enough points so that you can kind of get the basic shape of this. And when you're looking at 2, -8, let's go back to our graph. We've got these points, -2, +8. If I connect these points with a smooth curve, I'll end up with what we call a cubic. When I approximate my 0 here, I'm going to approximate my 0, which means the 0 of the function. So I'm going to approximate that with a trace because it's not exact in my table. So again, when I hit my trace button, I'm going to lose my picture. So please hit pause and get your picture down well. And then when I try to get to my trace button, I'm going to try to get the approximate value of this 0. So looking at your points, again, how do I look at my points? I'm pretty close to the 0 here. So I'm looking for when is the y equal to 0. And the y is equal to 0 at approximately -1.3 is our 0 point. And that's what we mean by the 0 of the function. Okay. This is a low point, so we would identify that point as a relative min. So try 3, 4, and 5. I'll try to put those final answers on. But basically, you'll be using your calculator. You'll be using the trace button. You'll be using second and then the graph button to get into your table and plotting those points on here so that you can get your basic shape of your graph. Number 3 is an interesting example. Again, let's look at why our graph is a little different shape. Here, we're talking first off about the degree. So the degree is the highest power of x. So the degree in this case will be a 4. And what does a degree 4 kind of give us? It kind of gives us what I might refer to as a W-looking graph. So again, one of the things that we'll want to do is when I said display the basic shape of this thing is kind of a W, but we'll want to get more accurate than just kind of sketching in a W. We want to get exactly what the graph looks like. So again, your steps that you'll want to do here, you'll want to put the equation into the calculator under the y equals. Then you'll probably want to hit second graph, and those will give you some points. Okay. Then plot the points and kind of go back and forth with the graph and the points so that you can kind of see the basic shape. Okay. So I'll try to mark that off of how I'm doing it, but it will be a little difficult because I can't do points and show you what my calculator looks like at the same time. So hopefully you have this in your graph. When you hit second graph, you'll see some points here. So if I plot the points 0, 2, 0, 2, 1, 0. So when I approximate the 0, there's a 0. 2, 4. So how many points do I want to get? There's a -1, -2. Oh, here's another 0 right here, -2, 0. So how many of these points do I want to plot? I want to plot as many points as I need to kind of see the basic shape. So if I look at these points right here, it's kind of hard for me to connect those dots. So what I would do is I would go through and plot a couple points. I get those from my second graph, and then go back to my graph. I would go back to my graph and kind of get a look at what that picture is. So how am I going to connect all these dots? I'm going to connect all these dots by get some dots, look back at my graph, and then I can connect it with a smooth curve. So now my graph looks almost like my graph on my calculator. So try punching in 4. When you punch in problem number 4, look at your points. When I have the points 0, -2, and I'm looking at some of these points, then go back and forth, graph your points, then go back to your graph and try to connect those dots as best as you can. And see if you can get your graph on paper to look like the graph on the screen. Here you'll be asked again, degree is 4. You'll be asked to approximate the zeros, which are these points here and here. Hit trace and come up with those points. And then when we talk about highs and lows, these points would both be considered maximums because they're high points. This is a low point on my graph. This would be considered a min. Looking at problem number 5, again, type in your problem number 5. Make sure that you use your caret sign to plug in the equation properly. Graph, and this time this gets really crazy. So again, you'll want to hit second graph and you come up. We've got some points. When we're graphing these, this is really funky. Good luck. I'll come around. Almost all calculator work today, so make sure that you know how to use your calculator.